Our report. Okay. Got two.
To do a roll call.
You have to do roll call.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order and I'll ask the secretary to recording
Tell
secretary.
you about that, Judy? I can do it.
No. I was just taking notes.
Oh, no, there's much more to it than that.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, he left out those.
Yeah, you'll be
Yeah.
presenting for an hour.
Well, I have a story.
oh.
Not shy about talking.
Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. You remember I'm Melissa, I'm this charter attorney. We have a special guest here today. Adrian had a last minute emergency, found out about it about 1:30 this morning. And so Chris Graves is a paralegal in our department and she stepped in. So a huge thank you to her and this leaning into this role here tonight. And so I will be attempting to help her and we have the recording. So Adrian will help her prepare the minutes. Ask for a little grace in that process as we pull it together tonight. So you all have a copy of the roster at the door when you came in. I'll go through and call there's some blanks here because we're in the process of filling vacancies. Rod Extel. Ronald Barnes.
Here.
Nicole Kohler.
Here.
Kathy Gustafson.
Here.
Cynthia Hunt.
Here.
Ronna Lindell.
Here.
Jamil Mass, oh, I'm sorry, Mass, I don't have it on my notes. It's on a different sheet of paper. Sorry. Grant Peterson. Steve Peterson.
Here.
Don Stanley.
Here.
And Mark Thorson has requested in advance an excused absence for tonight.
We heard from Rod too in advance.
We did.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Have a new member here,
Yeah, you didn't call my.
Emily.
Oh, I didn't call Emily. Oh my gosh.
Welcome.
Right, you're added to the list. Emily Melby,
Melissa, where did you say the roster?
the back of the room.
No.
Oh, you before.
Did I miss anybody else?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to the next item of business and
Not for a while.
the piece of the first part of it's in the organizational business category and it's electing a vice chairperson. Oh, who is this that left that we have the vacancy on the vice chair now?
Chair, the vacancy was created by the end of the term for Carrie Weatherby.
Carrie Weatherby, that's right. So the glorious job of being the vice chair of the Charter Commission.
Whose duties will be explained tonight.
Yeah, we learn about the duties tonight. So you could sign up before you learn about the duties. Is there anybody who's interested in being the vice chair of the Charter Commission? Anyone? Put it on your resume.
Never done that.
On that,
Never done that.
Can we hear just like maybe high level, like
uh,
that entails?
basically the vice chair is the person who runs the meeting if the chair is not at the meeting. Would be
That's the gist of it.
the high level thing, and no more complicated than that.
If the
So-
chair can't sign a piece of paper because
Yeah.
the chair isn't available, then the vice chair signs.
Yeah.
If nobody else is
You can do it.
interested, I could do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Now you're on the list.
Yes, I motion to elect Emily for vice chair.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll come to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, you're elected before you can take it back.
Too late now.
All right.
Okay, we'll move on to item 2.2, which is the city charter review, and I'll hand it off to Melissa.
Right, so as a bit of just a preview, thank you, Chair. There are quite a few slides, and if you saw the packet, you will see that. I'm going to do my best to keep us on going here, and we'll do it pretty much the same way we did it last time, if that's okay with everyone. I think you all commented that that worked for you. So next slide, here we are. We're going to endeavor to get through chapter 3 and then the rules of procedure, which are also in your packet. Next slide. As you recall, this is a part of the periodic review that you all have asked for. And will be this, when we complete the work that's on the agenda tonight, whenever we complete it, that will be what we had hoped to do in 2024. And as a reminder, this is in an effort to be prepared for the May annual meeting, where we will, if you so direct, tackle any amendments to the charter. All right, as a reminder, the charter's in your packet. It has 12 chapters, and we're tackling the first three rather. Last meeting, next slide. Last meeting, when we were talking about some items from chapter 2, there were several questions, 3 in particular, and we followed up with the city clerk. And so you have the answers here for that. She offered to come to the meeting, but she just had an election 2 days ago. So I said, let's take these answers and provide them to you all. And if you have any follow-up questions, we can roll it into the next update, maybe in May, or I can provide the information by email. So any questions related to this? The only one that I thought that required any sort of next steps possible or direction was number 3. There were a couple of sections in the charter that kind of go and provide a fair amount of historical context, which you all asked about, sort of, is that necessary and does it need to stay there? The clerk's opinion in particular about 2.03 is no. So if you all wanted to do that kind of sort of clarification cleanup, we could start removing those sections as we see them, or we could do it sort of in the normal course of business as we're doing cleanup. Those types of actions tend to, I would tend to make the suggestion that that kind of a cleanup go to the city council and then seek to have unanimous approval by the city council, as opposed to any more sort of process on something that's such a housekeeping matter. Any other concerns or thoughts on this follow-up? All right, next slide. Here, I put the sections. We can bounce through this if there aren't any questions. I wanted to be ready to answer them. We can go to slide 10, Chris. All right, so this is the first section of the charter that we're talking about tonight, council meetings. I wanted to pair this chapter 3 together with the language in the rules of procedure, because I thought, in my opinion, that they went together well and that they both talk about procedures. And so 3.01 is pretty straightforward. We have amended it as recently as 2022. Or excuse me, 2022. And we did that to clean up some ambiguity in the very first line of the section about the first Monday in January. We did a little bit of cleanup on that. And the rest of it is pretty straightforward. I brought some props that when it says the council meets at the times each month as are prescribed by resolution or ordinance. At the beginning meeting of the year, the council adopts this calendar that sets all of its regular meetings for the year. And then also notes, we have a couple of special budget meetings that are only about the budget. And then we've also marked on this calendar the election dates where we're not allowed to conduct business. This section of the charter talks about who can call a special meeting and notice requirements. Those notice requirements are by and large detailed in much greater number of words and efforts here in the open meeting law, which is section 13D of state law. And then also in numerous opinions in cases from the courts interpreting section 13D. Meetings are open to the public. As you all know, data is accessible and complies with data praxis law. Any questions or points of discussion on 3.01?
Kevin Peterson, my only question when I read through this was 9.7, that's 3 up from the bottom, to make it easier. Is the member's residence, member or elected a member's residence with a responsible person? I have no problem with the wording myself, but responsible, leaving something with a responsible person seems a little uncertain.
Chair members, I think that this is a bit of a hybrid of what is required for legal service and that you have to leave it, can't sort of leave it with the dog. You have to leave it with somebody who, is going to, I think the point of this, if I could speculate, is that it's actually going to get into the hands of the person that needs to receive it. And so if you give it to a quote unquote responsible person, I will say that this, I believe we discussed this provision and we amended it a couple of years ago. Or maybe we never amended it, but we talked about it. Because, well, actually, I remember what it was. It was in the rules of procedure that said you had to, everything had to be hand delivered. And council members didn't like that because they were being hand delivered by the police or CSOs. And so you had CSOs showing at your house, and then people were like, why are the cops at your house? And so we amended the rules of procedure to allow a little bit more flexibility. And maybe in 2022, we did that amendment there as well. But essentially, it has to be delivered.
So then the final case you have to come to.
Yeah, it was something that was commonly done in my experience in the past.
I mean, if you can't, it's okay to hand it off to a 14-year-old, but not a 13-year-old? Or a 9-year-old, or I just don't know if if that's ever going to be.
Mhm.
As practical matter, I don't see it ever being a question asked by a reasonable person
Mhm.
as to what a responsible person is. But
I think the goal is that you're leaving it with an actual person as opposed to
done.
like between the front door and the storm door.
But all right,
Has to be a person.
guess that's just,
I mean, I hear responsible as being the
yeah,
question.
it's not a person. Okay. If you don't have a problem with it, I don't have a problem.
I have problems with several things in the rules of procedure, but this one doesn't give me too much terrible heartburn. Anything else on 3.01? All right, next slide. So this again is related to the open meeting law. Essentially, the Secretary of the Council is appointed at the beginning. This is an official office and it's one of the few offices that we have on the books, so to speak. And this person has very specific duties. It is an actual person whose name is adopted by the city council. They have to keep minutes, they keep the recordings, they keep the records, that it's their job to do so. And they can designate other people to help them accomplish those duties. And you'll see that sometimes if, for example, there's an extended leave of absence by the Secretary of the Council, then the council will take action to appoint an acting secretary because they have official duties. The other thing that the Secretary of the Council does is sign. They sign resolutions. Chris processes all of those. We've got firsthand experience. Any questions on this provision? All right, next one. 3.03, the council can set its own rules, as I mentioned. Here are its rules. I believe there's 17 pages. We most recently adopted them in March of 2022 after a lot of discussion. And it basically talks about how they do their business, not too dissimilarly from your all's rules of procedure, but in more current language and more detail. Any questions? I will say that in some instances, Robert's Rules of Procedure are used, and these council rules of procedure say when these rules don't address an issue, then we defer to Robert's rules.
I simply didn't understand what the phrase, but a smaller number can adjourn from time to time meant.
Chair members, it means that sometimes throughout a meeting, you lose members. And if you ever drop below your quorum on the last item, you would never be able to adjourn the meeting. So a lot of times the rules will allow you to adjourn if you lose a, you can't conduct any more official business, but you can adjourn. You can quit. All right, next.
One question I had. Has the council actually adopted an ordinance that lets them compel council members to come to the meeting, like to round up the council members and bring them over to the city hall?
I don't know if there's an ordinance on that, but there, Chair and members, there is, I don't know, I would have to check on that. But there is language in the rules that talk about whether if you don't vote, what that means. So it's compelling participation even when you don't want to speak.
Yeah.
So,
Because I read that as being more like, you know, if it was like our group, we could send the police over to John's house to get him to come to the meeting if we needed it.
right. I've not had to use that ordinance, but I have heard of it happening.
Yeah.
When people, would sort of go out to Wisconsin to miss a vote or, whatever. So I can check on that. I don't know. Right. Anything else? All right, 3.04. This means, this section, I interpret it to mean that the council is a legislative body and it has to pass laws by ordinance. And there are other rules that kick on by function of it being an ordinance. For example, there has to be a public hearing. It has to be published in the paper in advance, at least 10 days. It isn't effective until it's published. There are all kinds of protections that ensure the public knows what's going on and has the opportunity to participate. What this also requires is that the votes on council actions be recorded, and those are produced in the minutes. And what I also interpret this to mean is if it's not a unanimous vote, the people that are voting for and against something are noted by name in the minutes. And the last part of this that talks about an affirmative vote is a bit of a nuance, but it came up during the garbage organized collection discussions, and because there's similar language in state law. And so what this means is that passage of something, it's nuanced, but you can't pass something unless it's a vote to pass it. You know what I mean? Like something, you can't have action on something because it failed. And so it's just a bit of a nuance, but it ultimately resulted in us preparing multiple versions of the organized collection language in order to be prepared to act at that particular meeting we needed to act on in an affirmative vote. So it does actually happen and mean something. Any
So
questions?
is a different way to say that is at a meeting, if you got a choice between two courses of action and you vote on option A and it fails, you haven't made a decision at that point. You have to go
Right.
on B and get the rally people behind B.
Yes, Chair.
Where is there a proviso for, and before an ordinance is passed by the council, that there is an assurance that it's consistent with the charter?
Chair and members, I'm not aware of a provision that requires consistency with the charter, other than to say that if it wasn't, we wouldn't be able to move forward with it. It wouldn't. I would say that it's my duty to have identified that and done something about it.
Well, I guess my question is there a provision for making sure that as they're passing an ordinance, somebody says, yes, this is consistent with the charter?
Chair and members, what I have seen done as a technique to address that is in the recitals, things that are being passed, resolutions, for example, or the staff report, they'll systematically march through the authority that gives rise to the action that they're taking. So you could have foreseeably, the charter provision X allows this to happen, sections blankety blank of state law, city code, and kind of march through that process. Sometimes the charter is silent on the topic, and so you wouldn't be able to cite to that. But if you look at our resolutions, they most often include language that identifies the statutory authority that I like to say that it tells the story about why we're doing it and how we're doing it. But it doesn't always involve the charter. But I get what you're saying, but it's not always implicated. Maybe in a nuanced way, but not in sort of the overarching topic that's being discussed.
And that part of that happens, isn't it? Because the kind of early in the charter, there's that kind of
All
big
powers.
all powers grant that basically says the city council gets, all the powers that it could possibly have,
Yeah.
except for, and then we're in the charter in my book is in the mode in a certain way of kind of taking things away from that. So you start out with everything and you're taking away.
Term members, and people do ask me about sort of how broad is that all powers clause. I just had somebody ask me the other day. So what is the meaning of health? So it does come up. But I think the next provision, nope, it's not that one. It's there's one other one coming up that has come up related to single subject. And I think it might be in the rules where that has been a topic of discussion internally when things have sort of grown beyond what they were advertised as. And the public has to understand what we're taking action on. So we need to be mindful of identifying what it is that we're taking action on and explaining what it means in a way that people can understand.
Thank you.
Other questions?
All right, 3.05. So this has to do with the publication. Our Chris Graves here is very familiar with this. She publishes these, most of them, and pushes them to the paper. So like I just mentioned, that notice, it says the specific provision that's being amended. It says what it does. So relating to dog ordinances or whatever, dog restrictions or whatever, when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen. And then it's published in the paper. This says at least once, 1 week before, and other provisions of our city code say 10 days. And state laws say 10 days. So what ultimately happens is we publish, because the newspaper comes out on Thursdays, it's published on Thursdays. We publish most often 10 days in advance when we publish. Under very limited circumstances, state law requires multiple publications when you're amending the charter. And so we will publish more often then during that process or when you're going to the voters, but state law will give more specific requirements periodically. But this is the default.
Which newspaper is that?
That'd be the chair, that would be the Sun Current. At the beginning of each year, the city council adopts its official newspaper. And we use the Sun Current based on its circulation, the depth of its circulation within the city of Bloomington.
Would be an example of an ordinance that the charter is silent on. Seems to me that if the charter is like a constitution of the city, everything ought to be consistent with and part of the charter. And imagine an ordinance that wouldn't be consistent.
So Chair, off the top of my head, the thing, I'm getting this question on the fly. So based on my research just now, the example that comes to my mind is the sign ordinance that we adopted last week, week before. It has to do with signs on the sides of buildings, on the right of way, everywhere, signs. And I don't think that the word sign is mentioned anywhere in the charter. I would say it falls under the all-purpose general welfare clause. It's also going to fall under, many of these other provisions tangentially, not about signs per se. That's one example. Comes to mind. Dogs is another one. We talk about dogs anywhere in here, but dogs come up a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, emergency ordinances. We never hardly did these until more recent times. This is essentially a provision that addresses the protections that we have in place to make sure that we only adopt them very rarely and under very important circumstances that require quick action. And what we used this within the last couple of years, and we had to be mindful of this provision that talks about 24 hours. So we had an emergency ordinance that set a curfew, and we had to communicate with our prosecution department or division that we wouldn't be able to, in our police department, we wouldn't be able to prosecute anybody until after 24 hours after that ordinance had gone into effect. There's also specific language in here about the adoption. Sometimes during an emergency, it's more challenging to get everybody in a place where they can make a legal vote. And so you'll see here that at least 5 members, which is more than the majority. We have a 7-member council, so a little bit of a higher vote threshold. You don't need just 4 votes, you need 5. Any other questions or comments?
Was this used in the context during COVID to pass emergency safety measures, for example, or things like that?
Chair members, I know it was adopted during curfews. Do we also have COVID? I don't know that we used emergency provisions for that. I think we used normal process for COVID, but we did use it for curfew twice. I think 2 times we put a curfew in.
Just for more context, did those have a expiration within the ordinance themselves, like they expired after a set time? And would this specific provision be able to use for a more longer term ordinance? So does it have to have an expiration? Because it doesn't necessarily say so. And my interpretation, if it's correct, seems like they could pass an emergency ordinance, which could take effect as a normal ordinance would, without an expiration date, for example.
Chair and members, I definitely appreciate what you're saying. I would say that I think that might be technically possible, but the way we would more typically do business is that this emergency ordinance would act as a stopgap. And then once we could comply with the provisions of an ordinary ordinance, i.e. publish a notice in the paper, which just takes about 3 weeks to happen, then we would put in place the sort of more standardized approach, because then all the other protections for participation and study and notice would then also be in place, which are superior to acting on something in an emergency context.
So in practice, it's more of like a temporary.
And fair members, in my limited practice of using this, it has been temporary, I believe. And I also think that there are provisions in state law, I try to remember, like maybe chapter 4 of state law, that talk about emergency actions and have limitations on them. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say that there were provisions related to that. Also too, I mean, to me, an emergency, typically in the past when I'd use emergencies, it was because of a tornado, right? Where you would say like, we're closing down this perimeter because we have an emergency situation. Safe. You use the emergency ordinance for, immediate preservation of peace to prevent looting. You draw this perimeter because a tornado just went through, or a flood. And that was more commonly how we used them until more recent times. Hopefully we don't use it again for a long time. Any other questions? This one's pretty straightforward, have to be in writing. They're also signed. Questions?
Interesting that it's been amended.
Recently. I'm guessing something happened that gave rise to it having to be in writing.
Questions?
right, next one. All right, so this has to do with the signing, the publication of ordinances. I've talked about this a little bit. We have a little bit of a nuance in our charter. There are summary publication opportunities under state law as well. Summary publication is an opportunity to get notice out to the public about how they can get the full ordinance, but not spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of public taxpayer dollars to publish a lengthy ordinance. Sometimes these ordinances can go on for pages. I think the sign ordinance was like multiple double digits.
Yeah.
And so to publish something like that, I mean, the newspaper probably wouldn't even want that. I mean, where would they put it? So we are authorized under state law and then under this provision in charter to publish a summary so long as it informs the public. So we have a template. It talks about the number of the ordinance that was adopted, what it did, where you can get a copy. We also have copies online, and public is informed, and we save a ton of money in the process as well.
It would sort of be on the, sort of like an abstract, if you will. I mean,
Yeah, chair members, it does function similar to that.
Yep.
Yeah, like a Reader's Digest version. Yeah.
thank you.
Has there been any discussion recently about changing the mechanism of sharing that out? Like, for instance, I didn't even know that newspaper existed.
Chair members,
It's
it's
like,
a question about how to know that the information is in the Sun Current or how to know that we put information in the Sun Current.
I mean, it makes me curious, like how many residents know that that's where those ordinances are published? And I also wonder, like, is that a newspaper you need to purchase? Because then I feel like it might also potentially restrict like the availability to the general
Mhm.
public. So I was just curious if there has been or any discussion or murmurs about potentially putting that in a resource that's more easily accessible to like the mass.
Mhm. So Chair and members, a couple of years ago, I researched publishing it in Star Tribune, which is also has a paywall on it, online. It was significantly more expensive and the circulation at that time was not as deep in the city of Bloomington as the Sun Current. The other thing that people may not know about and that we use is e-subscribe. So you can go online onto the city's website and click the things that you want to be notified about. And it's very specific and also very general. So for example, you could go on there probably, I don't know, I haven't done this, but you can click the box that says Charter Commission, and every time the Charter Commission email is published, our information about the Charter Commission is published, you would get an email about that. So some people sign up for a lot of them. I know that because they reach out to us with comments. But that is also an option. And there was recently language that was adopted that protects those data lists, so they can't be harvested.
Comment on that. Each of the commissions at the beginning of the year acknowledge that that's the official, they can select whatever, but I think probably more people, and it is free, you have to call and request. It used to be delivered to everybody's home, and then they stopped, and then they've limited fee, and you call, it'll be delivered. They can install information, but it's free delivered. So.
Yeah.
Chair Peterson, I think Emily raises a really good point in that those of us who have either been in town for a long time or who have been involved in things and tend to be out there looking for sources of information. I probably have about a dozen of these subscription things. There's probably a fair number of Bloomington residents who have no idea what the Sun Current is.
I would think it's a majority.
May well
Huge
be.
number, huge.
And it isn't that the Strib's any better
No,
or better alternative, but that perhaps we need to look towards a second official, whether it be the briefing or I don't know what, but something to supplement, in hopes of reaching ideally everybody.
Mhm.
Which is never gonna happen, but I don't know, you know, but I think we need to think more along those lines, that not, it's just not good enough.
Mhm.
And we're probably getting a little off with it. Does the briefing have anything where you can e-subscribe? But I think by some people that are frequent and decision makers, that everybody knows. And the reality is, people don't know.
It's just not so,
Mhm.
unfortunately. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
Yeah. So Chair, one of my takeaways from this conversation is that I'm going to talk to our communications director and see if we can get a little crossover pollination with the Sun Current and have a little box in the briefing, which gets delivered to every household, that talks about how the Sun Current is the official newspaper and how because it's also online. And then also about how to sign up for e-subscribe. And
So are the items that are published in the Sun also published on the city of Bloomington's website in
Yep.
some form?
Yep. Yes, Chair.
Not everybody has internet. They just don't.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you don't have internet and you don't know what the Sun Current is, or you're not getting it, even though is there still offer a free version? I mean, or is it a voluntary subscription? I don't remember.
Yeah,
But
it's a big-
It's free. Yeah.
It used to be free.
It's just not, it's just not out there.
So, one other thing I'll just mention, Chair, in case it answers anybody else's question, there are provisions in state law that require mailed notice to certain geographic areas around where actions are about to happen or be considered. And so, we have a postcard that will be sent out to certain, we literally use the software and draw the line or the circle actually, and then it gets mailed out. But we've heard from people that, people also don't open their mail anymore. And so we've tried to format them in a way that's, we used to have mailed notice and envelopes and nobody was opening those. So then we switched to postcards because we thought you can't even there's nothing, it's all right there. You just see it, but then people don't check their mail. So, it's an ongoing challenge. And sort of the rub between pushing out too much stuff so that they ignore, they kind of ignore it, which is something that we talk about all the time with these e-subscribe, because they can do like a mass blast, I think they call it, but they don't want to do that very often because people will start ignoring them. So they save that for really important stuff, and so that it gets people's attention and it's out of the norm. But you can also it seems like the way is more sort of towards, you have to go fetch the information yourself. If you're interested, you would know how to go fetch it, right? But what I hear you saying is let's think creatively about ways we can also pitch as well as.
Well, there's a difference between what we're required to do.
Mhm.
This meets the test of that.
Mhm.
And what we maybe should be doing to do what we want to do,
Mhm.
which is to reach as many people.
Yeah.
On the school, so whatever.
Nicole?
Yeah, thank you. Commissioners, this conversation is, I think, really steering towards serving that disconnect, of citizens and the civic duty and the accessibility towards resources and everything. And I'm not sure where we're gonna head with this and everything, but I think with going with this, it would be really great to have a really inclusive, forward-thinking, maybe modern applications towards what we're trying to do, I guess I just kind of wanted to put it out there and put it on record. If we can look at other things as well while we're at it, accessibility wise, language wise, inclusivity wise.
Mhm.
They also, I know they recently rolled out the Welcome to Bloomington program for new residents where you, in your action of following up with the Bloomington briefing.
Mhm.
Or I could take it as a action item because I know some people that are on that team. And so maybe that could be another mechanism to just get it in front of more people.
Yep, I'm writing that down. Chair and members, the other thing that comes to mind that I want to make sure you know about is that in some instances, we've done more interactive things. So there's the Let's Talk Bloomington, which people can participate in, and it gets pushed out in a variety of ways. But then also some of the things that I've seen more recently is the use of QR codes where we'll put like kind of a lawn sign near a project, and then you can scan that code and it'll take you to where you can get more information. So I know that they're trying, and I know that there's a report about all these different ways. We have a language access plan that describes under what legal circumstances where we need to translate, and then in what languages we need to translate. And what we tried to do, and I think we do it on some of our mail notices. Chris is surprisingly helpful here tonight. Not surprising, I shouldn't say that. Relevant.
Surprising.
Surprising myself
So
at 8 o'clock.
it's relevant. We put a sentence at the bottom that says, if you need this information in another language, in that language, right? So that we don't provide, copies and copies and copies of the document mailed to everybody, their language, like if you would like this information in this language, then contact. And then we have a language service that provides simultaneous translation.
So I think the key thing to think about as a group, we've heard from the city attorney or our attorney that the city does a lot of things that go way beyond what the statutory requirement is. Because theoretically, the city could just plunk something down in the newspaper and be like, hey,
Right.
in that case.
Yes.
I think the question that we have to ask is there a role in the charter language that we want to kind of put in place with regard to that? And I think, listening to the current city council members, they take the communication responsibilities seriously. We spend a bunch of money to mail the briefing out to people, and Melissa talked about the other different things that aren't free that we're using to try to communicate with people. Are we worried that that's going to go away and we want to somehow lock it down in the charter that they do things? That's the thing I would encourage people to think about this conversation, because I think it's good that there's strong outreach. I think the question we have to ask is, how does that relate to the language that's in the charter?
Right.
And we don't have to answer that question right now. We can think about it and come back. John?
Just a question. Melissa, did you say that the briefing is mailed out to every household?
Chair members, every residential household.
Well, then it seems to me that might likely be the most likely candidate for a secondary source of an official city publication.
Chair and members, the one challenge that I'll offer with using it for that is the production schedule for it. In that we can broadcast that something's going to happen in the future in the briefing, but it's very difficult to use it like we use a publication that publishes every week, because it publishes once a month, the briefing, and they're collecting story ideas for June right now. And if you've seen it or looked at it recently, it's, beautiful piece of government communication, and notices for ordinances might not be the most exciting thing they want to put in there.
That isn't appropriate.
Well,
Put that in there.
Award-winning government publication, many times over. But we use it occasionally. We'll have an insert in it to accomplish something that has to get
Yes.
out.
It still may not be timely.
Right.
It has to be something that's pretty static.
Anything else?
I appreciate you sharing our announcement communications department tonight.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. I got it.
I knew you did. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So we edited this relatively recently, and we used to have some language in here that said things didn't go into effect until it was kind of challenging to operationalize. And so I believe what we added was or a fixed later date. And so I think what it previously said was upon publication, but every now and then you adopt something that you don't want to publish right away. or rather you don't want to go into effect right away, but you want to publish it. So we added this language in here that said, or a fixed later date. So sometimes we want to allow for information to get out and for people to have a chance to understand what the compliance requirements are going to be. For example, we will do this, the example that comes to mind most often for me is point of sale, when people have to change their point of sale in their software systems. And so we will pass something, we'll publish it, and then it'll be effective like 60 days later. So that people have a chance to update their point of sale software.
I think one thing you never really touched on is what's the difference between a resolution and an ordinance?
Chair members, an ordinance is, I would say the equivalent of that is a law. It's a local law. And a resolution is also an official action, but it's not a law. So, and then a proclamation is even like one step away from that. So a resolution has legal effect and so does an ordinance, but an ordinance is a local law that is, that has potentially civil penalties, criminal penalties that flow from it, but not a resolution. All right, next one. All right, home stretch, folks. 3.10, whoopsies. Well, you know what, yeah. 310. This is about how we show our deletions and our additions when we're presenting an ordinance for consideration, and what we need to do to communicate effectively about what we're doing, what we're seeking to do. So you'll see here that we have to say what we're taking out. We have to say what we're putting in. We have to do it with brackets and underscore and all the rest. And then I guess in some special circumstances, we can use italics and boldface. We don't do that very often. But this is sort of the minutia of how we do our work when we amend ordinances and resolutions. We do some of this very intentionally in a certain way so that it's clear to everybody, but also so that we can have a sort of a legal history about what we did in the past. So you can, like you see that down at the bottom, the legal history. So we will, I call it legal archaeology. When we're going to go work on something, we'll go and look what we did and what we did before, then what we did before, and we'll look at the packet from that meeting to understand why we did that, what was in their heads when they did that. We'll read the minutes, try and understand what were they thinking when they did that, why did this come onto the page, and be mindful of what we're doing moving forward. So for example, we do that with charter amendments. When there's a request to amend the charter, we'll look back at all the previous editions of that section, what was going on at the time, try to figure out what was going on at the time. What were they trying to do? What are we trying to do now? And then try to draft something that's got some durable language that's going to stick for a while. Any questions? You'll see it at the top of every little section we're editing. It says exactly what we're doing. And every city does it a little bit different. So, yeah. All right, last one. So this says that we have to have a book of ordinances. We do. We have an official copy that's kept down in the clerk's office. We also have an online subscription that we use through American Legal. It's a publication company. And you can get a copy of the code if you want. And talks about some additional publication requirements here. All right, all of it's online now, so it's pretty, or through our Laserfish system. Chair, should we keep rolling here? It's been a little less than an hour. All right, okay. All right, so now we're moving on to the rules of procedure, which were in your packets. They are, once you get to like the different orientation, you look like this. It's on page 75 of your packet. Rules of procedure. There are a couple of pages. I will say that these have not been updated since 19, I believe 90. I don't know what you all were doing in 97, but I suspect the world was a little bit different in March of, we're coming up on the anniversary, March 20th of 1997. So it was a long time ago. So what I did is Adrian and I mean, you can see my copy, all right? It's like marked up. Adrian's is even more marked up than mine. We do all kinds of things because these rules say we have to. Some of it, Chair, I don't think makes a lot of sense anymore. But you all feel free to disagree with me. And if you want it to stay the way it is, we'll keep it the way it is. But one of my goals of this discussion is that this matches, or rather reflects the practice that you all want to see happen. In my mind, we don't want to put rules in here that are overly burdensome and that don't make the situation better. And we want to be able to comply with the provisions. With that as an introduction, the first section, some of the sections are kind of lengthy and I didn't list all of the language in there, but this first section of section 1 talks about the time. It says, we're going to have a regular meeting on the first Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. That's our regular meeting. That's the one in May. Well, that's actually the annual meeting. And then it says when it falls on a legal holiday, we're going to meet the next day. So we don't meet on the first Thursday of every month. We meet for sure once a year. And until I started here, I think it was often once a year. So there's nothing wrong with that. And that is our regular meeting date. And we should have a regular meeting date, but that's when our regular meeting date is, the first Thursday of the month. So for example, just to play this out, practically speaking, the chair could tell me tomorrow, Melissa, I want to start having regular meetings on the first Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock. And that would just happen. We would start scheduling them. They would be regular meetings and, attendance would be a part of that.
And then I'd get voted out the next.
Just sort of like playing this out practically. I'm giving you some examples, okay? All right, the place is also relevant for what a quote unquote regular meeting is under the open meeting law. And it says that we're going to be meeting in the commission meeting room of City Hall. I've not been to that room before, but
It's in the old.
it's in the old City Hall. There you
Yeah.
go.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would recommend an edit that would say City Hall,
Yeah.
yeah. Civic Plaza. Okay.
Civic Plaza.
Okay. So that'll be the edit there if people are generally okay with that.
Okay, that's fine.
Let me go back for a second. Do people like having meetings at 7 o'clock? Is that working for people generally?
About 6.
Today it was 7:30, I noticed.
Yeah.
That was
Because I had a
meeting.
previous presentation.
Okay, yeah.
That was double booked.
That's okay. I think 7 is good.
And if there was a majority that said a different time, we could do that. But right now it will continue at 7 unless we change it. But that's within our power to
Yeah.
change that and say that. So.
Mhm. Yeah.
This does not have to go to the city council. This is just us voting.
I would have to double check that. When any of the commissions amend their rules of procedure, they have to go to the
But
city.
we're not a commission like
But
this.
we're not a commission, yeah. So I will double check that.
That's true.
All right. Now, this particular meeting, though, just to be clear, is a special meeting because it's not a regular meeting. That's the only reason. That is the only reason under the open meeting law. Okay, so the next provision says that in order to call a special meeting, either it can be the chair or any 5 members can call a special meeting, and they have to give 10 days notice. I will tell you that that is a lot more days notice than the state open meeting law requires for a special meeting.
48 hours.
Yeah, so you only have to give a couple days notice from state law. Under our rules of procedure, you have to give 10 days notice. So that might be something you want to think about. And then for a special meeting, this is consistent with state law. You have to say what you're going to talk about. And at a special meeting, you can only talk about those things that you have on your published agenda. So you think about whether you want to keep it at 10 days. I will say that functionally speaking, it tends to work out with at least 10 days notice because we are trying to get a quorum. And you're a rather large body to try and get a quorum for. And so it takes a little bit of time. So 10 days isn't terribly burdensome in a practical sense. It could complicate things if you were trying to do something a little bit quicker, in which case you'd have to have an emergency. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to meet more quickly, and it would have to be a legit emergency.
Right.
So beyond, well, is there anything that is in our normal course of duties that we would have to act in less than 10 days?
Not act in less than 10 days, but I will tell you during the charter amendment process, when we were doing some of those, it was tricky. We had a matrix, we had multiple, it was tricky because of all the different, in the charter commission's significant notice requirements. It was tight. I think we had just a couple of days wiggle room because actions under state law have to be done in 60 days or 28 days or 90 days. And it was tricky to squeeze it all in. We could do it, but there was if you all remember, we had to meet on certain days.
Yeah.
Right.
Change it.
John?
My concern would be is we shorten it. The shorter the notice period gets, the more likely we are to not have someone be able to make it. And then they have an absence,
Mhm.
excused or unexcused.
Mhm.
But unless there's a practical reason, we should shorten it up. I don't see any reason to.
The one clarification you could do, I mean, the only thing that I could think of is I like to clarify calendar versus business days. 10 days is right in the realm of being do you mean calendar or do you mean business? I would like to use calendar on 10 business days in this instance, given the tight times that we've had. So that would be one clarification that we could add, would be to say 10 calendar days.
I think that's fine. Yeah.
And shortening, I guess, other question, if we were to reduce the days, what would be the ideal time period to reduce the notice period? So would 7 be significantly better than 10, or is it just within the same realm of inconvenience?
Chair members, I would say 5.
Yeah.
It'd be essentially a week.
5 calendar.
5 calendar days. Because then you would capture a weekend. If you did it midweek, you'd really be more like 7 or 8. But that would, if you were going to change it to something, I would say 5 calendar days.
Yeah, that might be, I'm thinking that's, Adrian reaching out to everybody and it gets.
Well, at least 5. I mean, you could do it.
Oh, you could
more.
do more,
If you had
yeah.
10 days, couldn't you do it?
Mhm. Mhm.
10 days, but I'm just saying, if you're in a crunch and
Mhm.
all you had were 5
Yeah.
days, then you wouldn't be in violation of your procedure.
Right, right.
If it happened, just as a,
Yes, and I will say that we were very concerned about that.
Yeah.
About somebody raising, chair members, we were very concerned about somebody raising that we had violated our rules of procedure when we were taking those very heavily litigated actions. So we were
Exactly.
very, very careful to meet the requirements, which we were able to, but it was tight.
Yeah.
And I think it was tight for the members too. I mean, we had to meet on certain days.
right, it's hard.
Mhm.
Saying if we may change it to 5, it might avoid some future notice.
It would, chair and members, it would give us more wiggle room. Yeah. And we could say 5 business days instead of 5 calendar days, if that was more
Yeah.
palatable.
The trade-off, I think, just thinking about it is, it's nice to know in advance.
Yeah.
But if we're constrained by some deadline to do something, if the notice period is shorter, it gives us more flexibility to pick a date where we can all participate. And that's kind of
That's
the
what I
way,
think. It's more flexible.
I think.
Yeah. Well, and chair members, we'll see what they do at the legislature this year, but they're again, looking at the open meeting law at the legislature. So it's possible that they'll loosen up the interactive meeting requirements again. but nobody will know that.
What do people think about that date in there? How do people feel about going to 5 business days?
I think with it being for special meetings, which likely have a priority or sense of urgency in general, having a little bit more time erring on the side of caution with that, I think 5 days I'd be in support of that.
Anybody want to speak against that? Otherwise we can.
No.
Okay, sounds like 5 business days.
Business day?
Yeah.
Right. Then the last, or almost the last provision talks about termination of membership on the commission. And that's, there's language in state law about that. And it's somewhat, it could be construed as inconsistent with what we have in our rules. And my request to you all would be that you give me some authority to take a stab at tightening that up so that it's a little bit more consistent with the words that are used in state law. That would be my request for one specific edit. Termination can occur by resignation, someone moving out of Bloomington, a majority vote of the commission because someone has failed to fulfill their duties, which oftentimes is because they don't show up. And then the last one is the one that I'm looking to clean up a little bit. It says this, it's not entirely consistent with what state law says, and I'd like to make it a little bit tighter. And then looking for a little bit of feedback about this excused absence, which also exists in state law. And it says contact about it can be made to the chair, vice chair, or secretary. Just curious if everybody's comfortable with that. That seems rather like a lot of people to tell that you might, I mean, a lot of options that might not trickle up to Adrian, or the chair. So, I mean, but it's up to you all. I mean, I guess it's only 3, but something to consider.
What have you seen otherwise?
This absences notion isn't really anywhere else, other than the Charter Commission.
Okay.
I'm not terribly familiar with, I mean, usually unless you're super sick, they show up. Yeah.
On that, for the city commissions, that changed when I was on the city council, because originally it was pretty lax. And it was really hard for the city council members to vote people off the island. Because it required affirmatively voting, and it actually got changed on there where now it's automatic that you're kicked off the commission if you stuff, and then it's just kind of like, too bad, so sad. And
Yeah, so chair remembers the city code was amended a couple of years ago to address, among other things, absences and because people would show up for like the first 15 minutes and then leave, and so we had to get a little bit more prescriptive and say you had to be there for, I think it's 2/3 or 3/4 or something like that of the meeting. And you have to be there, I think 75% of the meetings and some specifics. Because it was complicated to vote someone off the island, to borrow the chair's metaphor.
so are people okay with asking for a draft of a new section D there?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So to match state law.
Yes, I
Okay.
think that.
Are the proposed changes going to be redlined and reviewed at a subsequent meeting?
Well, chair, definitely redlined. You all will tell me when. And then how late you want to stay here. All right, we made it through section 1. Next slide. Okay. So this one is shorter, but also we have that organizational meeting, the quote unquote annual meeting in May of each year. Typically the first Thursday in May. And this is the stuff that we have to cover. I would say we do it. We honor the words. I don't know how much is actually like program of work. I haven't seen a program of work, beyond the, this periodic work. But, you all have been told since I've been here that we periodically review and I bring items to you. So there is a systematic process that's happening. But I guess my question for you all is, do you want different words, or do you want a different approach taken by staff to address the requirements here?
I don't understand that what our annual report is.
The annual report is a requirement of state law. We have to submit it to, I think it's the district court. So at the annual meeting each year, we approve an annual report. And
You voted for it.
which is also a little bit complicated because it's a skeleton description of what happened. And then it's also a little bit of fill in the blank at the end because we haven't yet taken the action because of where it happens on the agenda.
Right.
And it's difficult to approve something at the same time as it's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, as if it's a historical document. So it has to happen. This is how we've done it for a very long time. Just pointing out to you sort of perhaps why we do it, but as well as, are you okay with this? Some of these things have to happen, but.
Certainly I am.
I think one thing we could do is we could make it clear that the annual report is actions that the commission took up to, but not including this meeting.
Okay.
Be one thing that we could do is that to fix the problem of the Escher thing where the hand is drawing the drawing kind of thing. No, we don't want that.
Okay.
Is there a specific date that is due?
Yes. I'm getting ready to pull up the state law here. Yes, is the answer. I want to say maybe 30 days after or something like that.
Is the May data state law thing? Or is that our thing?
I will look. It says you have to meet once a year. Yeah. Yes, it says you have to meet once a year.
If we did not say review program of work, what would an alternative language be for that? Would that be business or, I do think that's a little bit unclear.
It's intended to be kind of the plan for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is that would be better stated.
While Melissa is digging in
Yeah.
here, the other thing I'll propose is that we take that things be in this order. We elect the officers. Then we approve an annual report. Then we prepare a work program for the upcoming year would be the sequence of events that I propose is the right order of things.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that is, Chair, I would agree. That's clunky to have that chair in the middle of the meeting.
Yeah, it's better to do.
Yeah.
So we have to meet at least once a year during each calendar year.
Okay. I don't have a reason to propose anything different than May. Does anybody? Nope. Okay.
All right, so C through F is going to the top. Is that what I heard?
Yep. And then it would be B, and then it would be A.
Okay. Right.
Cool.
Hey, could you remind us again, for the annual report, who's getting it, where it applies to?
So Chair and members, the annual report is in the packet, and it gets sent to the courts. Yeah, so we have to keep a copy every time we we have to give a copy to the courts, the district court appoints you all. And so we have that sort of interaction with them. Right. The other thing that I would like some changes on is this notion of a secret ballot. I'm not familiar with any authority to have a secret ballot. And so I would propose that we change it to voice vote or a roll call or something. It's,
We just be silent on it.
yes.
Okay.
Our own charter requires that we, record votes. And so I'm not sure how we would do a secret one.
If we just deleted that line, would that meet your goal?
That would be great.
Okay. Pretty okay with that?
Just don't even.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. We're now,
That's better.
yeah. So section 3, next slide, is the agenda. And this says we have to have a written agenda at our regular meetings. If we want to consider something that's not on the agenda, we need a 75% of vote present. And then this is, again, this 10 days stuff comes in, and you have to give the agenda sent out 10 days in advance. And so I wanted to welcome some discussion on 10 days, and then this notion of this local news media. That's sort of old words.
Sure.
Typically, in my experience, what I've been told is that news media signs up for our e-subscribe, and then they just get those notices if they want them. Sending them, I don't even know who we would send them to. I don't know that the local television affiliates would want.
Yeah, maybe just delete that line.
Would it make sense to make it consistent on the days, just go to at least 5 business days in advance of the regular or special meeting?
That would be my preference. Certainly that first some consistency, yeah.
Right.
So ordinarily our meeting rhythm has been just the annual meeting in May. And we've had meetings that have not been scheduled in advance, like reacting to things. Have all of those been special meetings in terms of the schedule I'm showing like this?
Chair members, correct. They've all been special meetings.
Okay.
And they've all been, well, to my knowledge, you've all been provided with the agenda.
Okay.
Ideally, the packet 10 days in advance.
What I'm just thinking about is I'm thinking about the first sentence where we're on this rhythm where we have one meeting a year, and to say that we're going to write the agenda for the meeting a year from now. I think this made a lot of sense when maybe they were working on the charter and they were having regular meetings and stuff like that, but it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Chair members, I will say that the next regular meeting was typically the organizational meeting because all the other ones were special meetings. And so we didn't need to have much of an agenda writing experience because we already had the agenda. But we had a little bit of conversation. I wouldn't say that we had an agenda item that we actually wrote the agenda because we didn't know what it was. I guess we would end up saying something like, update matters up, it's hard to know what we're going to need a year from now.
Yeah. Because a mechanism that I've seen is that an example is like the chair or the vice chair can place things in the agenda, or a certain number of members of the commission can say, I want this to be on the agenda for regular meetings. And I think it actually allows more flexibility on this, because if you do that, then the staff knows that it's coming and you actually get the information, as opposed to going to the meeting and having a vote at the meeting that it's going to be in the agenda.
Right.
And then you don't have the information you need to be able to actually act.
That's pretty old.
So I guess the question is, if we modified this a little bit to allow, you know, a couple of the members of the commission to say we want this to be on the agenda with enough advance notice to allow materials to be prepared like that, could we use that to replace the first two sentences of that paragraph?
So I brought the council's rules because
Yeah.
they were recently edited quite heavily, and I thought there might be some inspiration. They say here with regard to agendas, that any two members of the council or the mayor may request that the city manager include a matter on the agenda. And so there might be something to draw from that language. We have at the council, 3 days prior notice for you have to get a copy of the agenda 3 days prior for a special meeting.
Would something similar like that be, instead of having two members, just have a member request something be placed on the agenda by informing the secretary, for example?
So chair and members, what I have seen happen, not in Bloomington, but Claire, but what I have seen happen is that my recommendation is that you create some sort of mechanism that somebody other than the chair can put items on the agenda. Because if the chair is the only one that can place an item on the agenda, then sometimes things will never get on the agenda. So I like the fact that there's a mechanism in the words that allow for someone other than the chair or the, to force an item to be on the agenda.
So you could have chair or vice chair or
Mm-hmm.
members.
Yeah, so the concept behind like that 2 number is that there's enough of a mass of people that are interested in talking about it.
Mhm.
Where, if it's just one person adding it and nobody else wants to talk about it, that doesn't meet the bar of what you want to
Yeah.
have on. And so we have 15 members, is that right?
Mhm.
And be analogous to that, it would be 3 or 4 people proportionally would be the same size of the group to say that something.
Chair, the one caution I would make on that is that you don't want the number to be very high. 2 or 3 might be the right number because of the open meeting law restrictions on having serial meetings.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want sort of commission to try and commission A to talk to commission B and then C and then D, trying to find somebody that agreed with them, because that would be potentially inconsistent.
Yeah, John.
Chairman Peterson, I understand your point about you're wanting to have a certain critical mass to address an issue. At the same time, I really think that why shouldn't anybody be able to ask for something to be put on the agenda? If it's without merit, it shouldn't take long to dispose of it. It may be wishful thinking, but in a perfect world. And if it's something that is important, turns out to be important, that the other commission members have considered or thought about, or something that's come up recently or whatever, it just don't see the problem with that.
Yeah.
Any individual being able to.
I'll say how it's worked in practice when I've been the chair before and when I was on the city council is that basically, for the most part, everyone had the ability, practically speaking, to ask for something to be on the agenda. And I think, to be honest, I think a good chair would listen to people and would put things on the agenda, even if groups didn't come and talk about that. What a couple people thing does is it keeps someone from, like, for example, wasting the staff's time by putting things in the agenda where stuff has to be prepared in advance for the in a situation where the group collectively clearly isn't interested in kind of hearing about that. And typically it's the sort of thing where there's been something going on for a while, where I've heard of that happening. It doesn't ordinarily, ordinarily a good chair, I think, would say, yeah, we should put that in the agenda. Maybe we have to arrange the dates or something like that to do it, but would do that. So Nicole?
I just want to share support for the two. It's like a motion seconded, like it.
If I wanted to put something on the agenda, I would call someone. And say,
Chair.
If I was, the first thing you do is you come and say, hey, can we put this on the agenda? And I'd
do anything you want to do, even though you're chair. Sure. Okay.
But that would be the two, right?
That would be
And
the
if-
two.
And if the chair members, if the chair sort of shut it down, then you would theoretically be able to try and find
Oh.
another person.
Be like,
Yeah.
And then you'd probably call the charter attorney,
We
because
both
things would
find
not be
it-
going well. And I would be,
So you said no, and I called Nicole and she agreed with me.
me and we're like,
You'll be in the agenda, and we would call Adrian.
or me.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So are we designating who's informed of that agenda item? And that are those two individuals or two members are interested in having that item on the agenda?
I would suggest that chair members, I would suggest that be a part of it, indicating who specifically. In the city council equivalent, it says the city manager. So, but you could say that, you could say me, or you could say recording secretary, or you could say the secretary. You have a secretary too, or the recording secretary, I should say. I'm just looking to see if it's in any other place in our rules.
Lost track where we are.
Okay, so what I think is, what I'm hearing, feedback, sort of summarize this section here. I'm hearing that it's not terribly practical in 2024 to write an agenda for the next regular meeting that's happening a year from now. And perhaps I should come up with some alternative language for that. And then I'm also hearing that there's a desire for any two members of the Charter Commission or the chair may request or may place an item on the agenda for the next regular meeting by contacting the recording secretary.
Sure.
Yeah.
So some key words that I said there were regular meeting. So that would be the next May, or frankly, actually, the next Thursday, first Thursday at 7 o'clock. If we wanted to, yeah. Okay. Okay, all righty. Well, I forgot to mention, could I edit out these Roman numerals and change them to 1, 2, 3 Arabic numbers?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I mean, I love a Roman numeral as much as the next person, but it's not the most terribly approachable, to touch on the previous discussion. Also too, on the annual report, we have to send it on or before December 31st of each year. Okay, but going back to this section here, I also heard about the agenda and reports must be forwarded to the members of the commission. I heard a desire for internal consistency in the document and that I should change it to 5 business days. Is that accurate? Okay.
At least 5 business.
At least, okay. Okay. And then what do we think about copies of the agenda being sent to the local news media?
No, delete it.
Try again.
Delete it.
I don't think they care.
I don't,
Like you say,
they don't care until they do, and then they'll find.
they have their ways of getting.
Okay. I mean, we have to publish the agenda. We're not keeping it a secret, so,
Exactly.
okay, it's on the website. All right.
I'm gonna say we do one more section and then we're done for tonight.
right, section 4. Or do you want to do a different one? Do you want to do roll call? That's a real short one. Okay, this talks about the duties of essentially the chair. And I will say, this document does not need to get into it, but if you want to get into this decorum discussion further, I mean, obviously it's a hot national topic. I will say at a very high level, the meaning of the term strict order and decorum has changed probably quite drastically since 1997. And there are very specific provisions laid out in the city council's language. Somebody can be removed. The last time I looked at the law on this, someone could be removed from that meeting. And then you need to allow them to come back to the next one. So there's nobody being banned forever and ever and always, for the most part, from participating in democracy. There were all kinds of other legal considerations at play, but I would suggest if you want to do some more work on decorum, that you read through the debate rules, and I can provide them to you in the city council's language, because those were recently discussed at great length and after some significant case law research. So just positing that for your consideration. Most of this is procedural. A lot of this is repetitive of what you would see in Roberts, for example, restating the question before it's voted on. That's a great practice. Make sure that everybody understands what they're voting on. And then saying what the vote was after it's happened. Also a very great and helpful practice for not only the recording secretary, but so that everybody in the room understands what just happened, especially if there were votes for and against, or it was tricky. If you're have a roll call vote, then it's a little more obvious, but we don't have those all the time. And then there's some discussion about questions of order, which would, but they say order, they means Robert, like parliamentary procedure. And you can sort of have an appeal of the rules and a vote to conclusively determine whether somebody's actions are consistent with parliamentary procedure. I did not bring my book, but that's what I was presenting on before I came here. In my opinion, parliamentary procedure, and this is just Melissa's opinion, is very complicated and it's not terribly approachable for some people, for a lot of people. And it can be used to run a meeting very smoothly and make sure that everybody understands. But for the people that don't understand, it can have the effect of preventing participation if you don't understand that something, for example, isn't debatable or can't be amended, or, for example. So this is what it says right now. And you all can think about it. You can certainly read what the city council decided to do. Parliamentary procedure is an amazing tool for when a lot of people understand how to use it. And it ensures that both sides are given the opportunity to participate and have their voices recognized. It provides for reconsideration when there's mistakes, all kinds of very, very helpful tools. And it's also complicated. So it is what it is. Now, the one thing that I would like you all to perhaps consider changing is this requirement that all documents have to be signed by the chairperson, by the commission, during the presence of the actual chairperson. We do things by DocuSign now, so it's more of a virtual presence. I would like a little bit more room to use modern technology and participate in 2024. If you're willing to let me draft something a little bit more durable there. But that's essentially what's happening in that paragraph.
John?
I would be perfectly happy if you redrafted this whole thing along the lines of what the city council has already spent way too many hours probably on, between them and you, to make it what it needs to be in that respect, and whatever practical matters as for instance, DocuSign, you see as helpful, because I don't see anything here as a practical.
Yeah. So Chair, I'll offer that the council's rules of procedure related to presiding officer and duties is very similar to what you see here, but modernized. So I could certainly attempt to, bring that for consideration.
That's fine. Other folks?
That works.
Nicole?
So you'd be interested in just kind of like crossing out the during her or his presence, and then like the sentence following wouldn't really need any changes either, right? To be able to complement like e-documents.
Yeah, so for example, Chair, what the council's rules say is the mayor must sign all ordinances and resolutions and contracts adopted by the council. Period.
Here, it doesn't say how.
Um,
It's not sign them, you sign them.
Yeah, in the event of the absence of the mayor pro tem must sign as needed.
Nice.
So,
That's good.
and then with regard to the Roberts stuff, the parliamentary procedure, it says the mayor, the presiding officer, the mayor must use the most current version of Robert's rules for guidance, interpretation, or to supplement these rules. State every question before it comes, announce the decision, it's very similar in cadence here.
So they opted to keep it in.
They did, but we modernized it to give a lot of deference to the rules that the council came up with. Yeah. We spent more time on the details in these rules when we edited them last time.
I don't want to spend it.
No, I mean, we spent hours about so Chair, I'm very interested in some guidance about how you want to, I think you all have a flavor for what's in here. I could prepare a red line and bring it back for a review of the following sections, or we can continue with the cadence that we are at now and the approach that we're taking. Either was fine to me. There certainly are some things that I would suggest should be updated. For example, a member may request through the chair the privilege of having an abstract of his or her statement. First off, I would get rid of all the his or hers in here. But I've not been around for an abstract preparation request. I'm not even sure how that would shake out. So there's kind of some things that are a little bit antiquated. There's a requirement that people have to provide their address in an audible tone. That's not consistent with how we carry out our business now. So some things like that just need to be updated.
So the question you're asking is, for the remainder of this, it's a question about the remainder of this. Do we want to continue to walk through and discuss things, or do we want to have you prepare a proposal and we're walking through instead of a proposal of this set of changes? Is that what you're asking?
Chair, yes, I'm open to that as an option if you'd like me to do that.
Okay.
But I also can continue doing it the way we are
What
too.
do folks think? Proposal?
I think a red line proposal would be great.
I think that would be.
Nicole?
more-
When would this be reviewed? If you prepped one?
Our next meeting.
Next meeting.
In May, right?
No,
Tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be at our next meeting. Yeah.
All right, I didn't know if that agenda had enough time or whatever.
5 business days. No,
We're not on, we have no particular schedule for this, so we can decide how often or less often we want to meet on it. And
Right.
it just kind of plays out.
Yeah, I just didn't know if May was already filled, but didn't we have May's meeting was already set with stuff? No,
It's not,
it's remembering, sorry.
it's not that meeting isn't, it's 45 minutes. So, John?
So you could just, from this point, just prepare a red line document for us to review before the
Yes.
next review meeting.
Yeah.
And we can still address any questions we have as we have been.
Mhm.
But you redline might just answer some of them.
We're just starting from a proposed set of changes as opposed to what it's at right now.
Good idea.
Everybody cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's called strict order and decorum.
Right.
So we were gonna stop at 4 there. Anything else on that before we adjourn for the night?
I think, Chair, that we have got, adjournment as the final agenda item.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Seconded. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries unanimous.
All right, thank you.
Decided without debate. Parliamentary procedure.
Debatable, I'll have to look at.
It's not debatable.
Yes.
But what do you think?
As long as this recording worked here, I think we're pretty good. Otherwise, I don't know.
That was the question, isn't it?
No, I just don't know where it is in my phone.
How
I
long have you?
probably have to explain the pronunciation.
Why was?
Okay.
3 or 4 times a day. So it's not-
Started part-time, since I stayed home with kids for a long time with, in IT, just as a help desk, but I had a, I had kids. So
I think it's
I
fine.
went into legal, so I've been in
I
legal
wish you could make it easier for people.
next month, 11 years.
But then again,
Yeah.
Okay, you're around.
that's right.
You were around when I was on the council then.
Yes.
Okay, so we stop the recording?
Melissa, is there someone that I need to connect with?